In this video, we will demonstrate how to remove the platform, remove the compressor, and get access to the bottom of air body where you can find the pressure relief valve if you want to replace it or clean. What we will need is a couple of tools. Number one, it's a screwdriver with a T30 Torx. It can be a screwdriver or power tool. We then will need also a T15 Torx, power tool or a screwdriver. We'll be using our special tool to rotate the heatsink, but you can also use just a coin. And then we also need a 16mm socket with which we will remove and then screw back in and tighten the pressure relief valve. At the end, we have another tool with the T30 Torx. Ideally, if you have, you can use a torque wrench like this one set to 9 Newton meters. If not, you can just go by hand. The first thing we want to do is we place air body on the side and we use the Torx 30 screwdriver to remove those two large screws that hold the compressor. So one on each side. To speed up a bit, we use a power tool. Keep the screws, we'll be reusing them. Now we remove the platform. You can just use a hand screwdriver with the Torx 15 or a power tool with a Torx 15 to remove the 4 screws in each corner of the platform. Let's keep the screws. Now the platform is loose, we can lift it. As you can see, it's connected to the compressor with some wires. For this repair, we actually don't need to remove the heat shrings and unplug the connectors. If you put the platform on the side, you can just manage without disconnecting. A good idea is to use a box like this, which has a similar height than air body, so you can just conveniently place it on the side. And now we need to remove the compressor. Simply grab the compressor breather and the back of the compressor and start gently lifting it up. Here we go. If the heatsink has a tendency to stick to the compressor, all you need to do is ever so slightly rotate the heatsink with either a tool like this or just a coin. If you do that, and now it's unstuck from the compressor. After you do that, please make sure that you rotate it back so that the fins perfectly align with the grooves on the housing. Okay, now the compressor is loose, so we can just simply lift it. Here we go. Okay, as you can see, the heatsink remained stuck on the compressor, so what we'll need to do is rotate it and place it back. If the heat paste is in a good condition and you are careful not to remove it, you can keep the same one. Otherwise, you would need to use a heat paste with a minimum of 8 VMK. Okay, now it's time to align the heatsink. Before we forget, and we can continue with the repair. The next step is to remove the pressure relief valve, for which we'll need a 16mm socket and just a hand tool. Here we go. Here it is. This is the pressure relief valve. When the pressure reaches somewhere around 38 psi, it opens up and releases the excess air. What we'll need to do is, if there is an internal air leak, check that it's nice and clean. In this case it is, but yours may look a bit different. The best and simplest tool to use is cotton swab, and something, it can be the socket, it can be a little socket like this, just to push open it and clean the seat. When you go all around and clean it until it's nice and polished. You can also use a little bit of O-ring grease on a cotton swab. Just a very small amount, just to make it slightly sticky, and lubricate the O-ring which is inside of that pressure relief valve, just like so. Now that the pressure relief valve is clean, we should replace the O-ring with a new one. If you don't have a new one, inspect the old one and make sure that it's not compressed and it's still in new looking condition. That means no cracks, no cuts, it's not out of shape. In this repair we'll use a new one, so let's put it on the pressure relief valve. Under the skirt there's a groove, a little bit of silicone O-ring which you can put on your finger and just run on the O-ring, or you can again use a cotton swab and spread it all around the O-ring, and then fasten back inside. You can screw it in by hand, ideally when you hold it upside down so it doesn't fall out, just like so. We will use in our video a power tool just to go a bit faster. And now if you have a torque wrench, fasten it to 12 Newton meters. If not, try to estimate 12 Newton meters which is not too loose, not too tight. Basically, you can achieve that force just with one hand. Okay, we have the pressure relief valve back. Now what we'll need to do is insert the compressor. As I said before, it's a good idea if you place everything in the same order so that you don't twist the wires, and it makes it then easier to reinsert. In case the compressor cylinder stuck on the other side inside of air body, just remove it by hand, pull the piston of the compressor out, and then when you insert the cylinder, make sure you go gently at a slight angle and rotate it to make sure that you don't cut the sealing of the piston. Here we go. Now what we'll need to do is a bit tricky. Hold the compressor in one hand while inserting the siren. So the siren goes with the beige face towards the inside of air body. So just push it in until you reach the bottom. Hold the cable, insert the compressor so that you feel it touch the bottom. Make sure that the wires are nice and organized and are here on the side between the boss and the body of the compressor so they don't get pinched later on. Open one more time, look underneath, just to massage the wires to where we want them to be. So that means between the boss and the body of the compressor, and here at the compressor breather there is a little tooth, so you want the wires to go underneath of that tooth. It helps to hold it in place. One last thing before we close the platform, push ever so slightly on this wire to make sure it goes in a little bow. It's well away from the boss so it doesn't get pinched when we close. Now we close the platform, push by hand, and check that all of the holes are perfectly aligned. There is no gap between the platform and the boss. Before we screw in the platform, we also need to place back the screws that we removed. These are quite important, so we need to replace the O-ring with new one. Here are the new O-rings. We lubricate them with silicone O-ring grease, just a little bit on each. Okay. The other thing we want to do is, if there is no residue of the old thread locker, then you can use some brush or a toothbrush to remove it, clean it, and then apply new thread locker. We're using Loctite 243, that's the blue thread locker. Just one drop on each of the screws towards the end, just a couple of millimeters from the end. We also want to clean the seat. So the other side where the O-ring sits. Again, the best tool to use is a cotton swab or cotton tip. And now we can screw in the compressor. I'm going to use the power tool. just to reach the end. And now ideally, if you have a torque key, so set it to 9 newton-meters, use the Torx 30 and just fasten the screws. Back to the platform, all we need to do is place back the 4 plastic screws and fasten. Again, you can use a hand tool or we use this power tool. We set it to number 8 and fasten. You can go in a cross pattern, so start in one corner, move to the other corner, and that's it. So we have removed the platform, we removed the compressor, we removed the pressure relief valve, we cleaned, replaced the O-rings, put everything back in the reverse order. And now you need to check that it holds the pressure. That means you pressurize your air body with the float and switch off and wait and check the pressure gauge that it's not, that needle on the pressure gauge is not moving. That means it holds the pressure.